When partnerships don't work out, they're not very easy to dissolve. And it's not something that necessarily happens overnight, but it's something that continues to just creep up. And over time, it can really distort your view of the other person. And so it's really important to make sure that your personalities align and that your goals align because it is a long-term sort of endeavor with any partner. And I think a lot of people just start off thinking if I'm friends with somebody, I can get along. And I can tell you being in business, when everything is great, it's easy to get along. When things go south, that's when true colors come out. And you don't know that until it happens.
Everyone, thanks for joining us today at Elite Expert Insider. We have a great guest today. We have one of the number one international best-selling authors of the Entrepreneur Secrets books, Romain Kapadia, and he is going to join us today with all of his journey and entrepreneur secrets. So if you're an entrepreneur and maybe you've had to stop and start and are frustrated, let me tell you, this guy knows the ropes. He has been in several different businesses, which really impressed me. And we're going to go down this rabbit hole with him. And you're going to learn a lot of things about being an entrepreneur today. Thanks, Romain. Thanks for joining us today.
Awesome. Thank you, Melanie, for having me on.
So tell me a little bit about your journey and how you got started and kind of knew you wanted to be an entrepreneur.
Yeah, I think my story really starts in childhood. I was just kind of figuring out what I wanted to do in high school. And just observing those around me. And we had a group of friends that were business owners. And I always noticed how fulfilled they were and the level of freedom they had. And I started thinking to myself, maybe this is what I want to do. So I started learning about that journey pretty early on. And I even tried a few businesses when I was pretty young. And eventually you try a few things and you fail a few times and eventually you get it right. So that's how I ended up in this path.
Wow. Well, tell us some of the businesses that you've been in, a little bit of that journey, because it's pretty interesting.
Yeah, so I probably the first one that I started, which is actually pretty funny now, but being Indian, we use an oral device called a tongue scraper, which is actually it's more used now, but I 20, 30 years ago, I was using it as a kid, just a family habit that was passed down to me. And so I thought maybe this is something I can market to the American audience. I went out and negotiated a contract with the manufacturer here in Houston and actually had them put up all the costs, which was pretty skillful negotiation for my first one. And we ended up selling into a local grocery store chain. But one of the things I learned from that project was that changing consumer behavior is very hard. And so that sort of project would require millions of dollars in advertising and really getting probably the best route would have been getting in front of dentists to then talk to their patients about this. But I was young and didn't have the savvy back then, and it was great. We sold a few thousand units, which was a great start. But of course, it was never going to be much more than just a short-term project. And then beyond that, I went to UT, went to the business school there, and I've always had a sort of a creative bent, and so I've always loved hotels and other design businesses. And so when I was at UT, I had this idea that I wanted to start a clothing label. And so after I graduated UT, I moved to New York. In 2001, actually, my first day of my first job was September 11th, which was pretty crazy. But got through all that. And I eventually just started visiting fabric stores and factories without knowing anything or knowing anyone in that industry. And I eventually started my own clothing brand and it really out of nowhere took off like wildfire I think within 1.5 years moving to New York, I was on the cover of Maxim magazine, a nobody kid from Houston. So that was a pretty big deal. And it was really just a testament to my tenacity. I was walking into stores unannounced, trying to sell my clothes. And eventually I got some momentum and I won some awards and I got some press and I worked with a lot of celebrities. So I did that for 9 or 10 years and eventually just realized that I wanted to do other things. And so I ended up going back to get my MBA and eventually pivoted to what I'm doing now.
Well, tell people what you're doing now.
Sure. So I run a couple of businesses. One of them is a private equity investment business, which I have a partner with. It's called Founders Capital. We invest into consumer businesses, retail businesses, hospitality, and wellness. They're all industries that either myself or my partner have direct operating experience in. My partner has been CEO of some very large consumer brands here in the US. And then day to day, I'm also operationally managing an events business in Texas, which started off really as one events venue. And we've now grown it to a portfolio of 4 venues and a catering company and want to continue to grow it. potentially into a regional or national brand.
Wow. That's great. It's so diversified, right? I mean, from investments to fashion to events, which is really kind of real estate. You're renting things out and creating a buzz. Wow. And I love what you said about the very first thing that you did. It's like if I would have gone to dentist, like that question that entrepreneurs are always trying to like, where is my customer? Instead of asking the question, who has my customers?
Correct. Yep. And these are things I guess somebody can look at my career as scattered, but I look at it as just having a very wide lens. I've seen so many different types of businesses that I can take from one industry and add to another industry, and that's how I look at things. And I think it gives me a really good sort of toolkit for problem solving.
Now, you didn't do all this by yourself, like you have some partners along the way. What did you learn and what were some of the pitfalls you had maybe with partners?
I think the biggest thing to get right with partnerships is I think too many people don't they take partnerships too lightly. And the analogy I use, which you've probably heard before, but a partnership is really a marriage. It's not when partnerships don't work out, they're not very easy to dissolve, and it's not something that necessarily happens overnight, but it's something that continues to just creep up, and over time, it can really distort your view of the other person. And so it's really important to make sure that your personalities align and that your goals align because it is a long-term sort of endeavor with any partner. And I think a lot of people just start off thinking if I'm friends with somebody, I can get along. And I can tell you being in business, when everything is great, it's easy to get along. When things go south, that's when true colors come out. And you don't know that until it happens.
Are there questions you should ask? Like, when you get married to someone, you're asking, what their beliefs are, their values are, how many kids they want, that sort of thing. Are there things that you should keep an eye on when you're considering someone to be a business partner?
That's tough. It's something that I've also applied to hiring. I've looked at resumes back and forth, and I've hired people with some of the best resumes for our industry. They don't they're not worth their weight. And I think what matters a lot more is character, your judgment, your intellect, your morality. So for me, those things are you can't really ask those things. I think you have to observe. And so for me, hiring or even getting to a new partnership, I think it's something that you should test before you actually do. And so with hires, sometimes we'll have a 90-day onboarding period to just make sure they're the right fit. And I think the same thing with a partnership. I don't think a question could answer sort of long-term alignment. I would want to know somebody for at least 3 or 6 months, work with them on a few different things before I really make that decision.
Yeah, and sometimes, even you might think it's going south, as long as they have good moral character, if stuff
Yeah.
goes wrong, you're in the trenches with the right person. It's
Yeah,
like, I'll
more than anything else, entrepreneurship is a battle of getting up, and you want somebody that will be in the trenches with you and not somebody that's gonna run away or whatever else. It is some days it feels like war, and you want somebody there with you.
it does. And you got to be able to pick yourself up. And that leads me kind of to your emotions, right? You talk about one of the key things for being an entrepreneur is managing your emotions.
Yeah.
How have you done that, or what advice could you give to entrepreneurs about that?
I'm very purposeful, so I have a routine every morning that I do, and I've read other people that kind of follow the same routine, but it's like I said, I look at almost every day as like war, business war, and I try to prep my mind for anything that can happen. I think just not getting in the weeds of the ups and downs of what happens every day is really important. One phrase that I always remember is things are never as good as or bad as they seem, and so what seems like your business is gonna go bankrupt tomorrow typically never happens, and then what seems like a great opportunity, it's probably good, but it's probably not as good as you thought in the moment, and so I always use that as a way to temper my emotions. And the other thing is too, I always when there's a bad day, those are the hardest ones to get through. I always just try to put everything aside, realizing the next day is gonna be a new day, and it's always better the next morning, so nothing is permanent. You just are kept to just keep moving forward through the motions.
That's such a good way to look at it, that nothing's permanent. This too, my dad used to say, this too shall pass. It's
Exactly.
you're not going to be in this state forever. And I kind of armor myself every morning, like just being in a positive state, right? Because then you feel like if your mind is in a good place, you're feeling like it's going to be a great day. Then when stuff hits you, it bounces off of you a lot faster, don't you think?
100%. I mean, I meditate, I go to the gym in the morning, I journal, I do all that. It takes me an hour and a half, but it really does set my day and I'm ready for anything.
Yeah, ready for the armor. And then, when you bring that emotional energy into the workplace, it helps set the culture. So obviously, especially with the event business, I'm sure you have multiple employees and people that you're managing and catering company. And with the hiring too, because when you bring them in, that someone that's going to be into your culture. How do you keep a good culture going on and develop the culture for your company?
I mean, it's so true, but it really starts at the top. I think how you walk in the office is how everybody is gonna that energy is what people feed off of. And so it's important that I keep my mindset positive. And, there's a very fine line between showing everything in the business versus showing what's possible. And I think giving people hope, a route to excel themselves, whether it's through their job or becoming a better person or whatever else, I think that's very important. They have to have something forward looking that's going to draw them in every day because some days are monotonous, some days are bad, and whatever else. But I really believe that if people believe in the mission, then it can carry them through some tough times. And I always actually say that one of the things is that's very intoxicating is people want to win. And so when you're part of a winning team, it's very easy to keep them motivated. But winning comes with building the right culture and the right mission. But I look at everything, I want everybody to win. And I think that's a very easy way to keep everybody aligned with what the goals are.
Yeah, it's always easy to be energetic and happy when you're winning. It's when things are down on your in the trenches, you're like, okay, we're still, this is how we're going to do it. That kind of leads me into leadership. As an entrepreneur, it's almost a tough job. You have to lead yourself every day, right? You've
Yep.
got the discipline where you're working out and getting your mindset right. And then to manage just for someone who's like in their 20s or even in their 40s, they're starting something new and transitioning. They're like, okay, I can lead myself, but now I got to be able to wake up and lead everybody else and motivate them too. It's hard enough to do me.
Yeah.
What are some of your tips on being a leader?
I really just think it comes down to having great energy. I think energy is very underrated. And I think people are starting to realize that now. But I think the energy you carry in a room, the sort of just the vision you have in your head is so important for you. You're selling a dream as a leader in a business. And, that dream has to translate down to the employees as well. And I think that to me is really the core of building a great culture.
Selling the dream also comes when you're selling to clients or to your customers.
Yep.
You're really selling the dream. What are you seeing in now? Because all your businesses, especially the event business, you're having people, do you want them to come to your venue? What are you doing for marketing these days? What is working for you?
We hired recently a great marketing director, put all the pieces together. Being our events company, like many hospitality companies, there are individual units that have their own brand identity, but we also are trying to put together a more cohesive story about the company as a whole. And I think that's what's really resonating is our story of being the best in the region for what we do. And so our marketing it's a twofold approach. It's both targeted. So we do social media, we do paid ads, but we also are really focused on building sort of a broader brand awareness. One of the tricky things about events is you have to always be top of mind because you never know when somebody's going to plan an event. And so it could be tomorrow, it could be 6 months from now. But the thing is, whoever somebody thinks of first for for their event is who they're going to go to. So having that broad brand awareness is really, really key. And so I think we're trying to do things that are a little bit outside the box to build that and just be more exciting. Our catering company was actually a 40-year-old company that we purchased, and it has an amazing history. We've catered to every president since Jimmy Carter. We've catered to the Queen of England. Incredible history. But when we took it over, the perception of luxury has just changed since the '80s. It's not in the '80s is very exclusive, keeping people out, versus luxury now is much more inclusive. And we wanted it to be younger, so we've done a lot of things to just make our brands younger and fresher. And I think we do a pretty good job of just trying to be different from the rest of the industry.
Yeah, and nowadays it's so much content, creating so much content, especially for your venue, you probably can create a lot of content.
That's key.
Uh-huh.
Visual
To just
content. Yep.
to slam that market hard. I mean, I think that's where I would be as a marketer. I'd be, being keyed into TikTok and YouTube and Instagram and really pushing out those videos on social media because you'd have so much fun stuff that you could show and edit and put together. That's really cool.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Visual is so important, and we work in a visual business.
And then what about private equity? So that is where a lot of people are jumping in. If you had to tell a young guy or even someone who's, like I say, transitioning, what's your advice for getting into private equity these days?
I had a interesting opportunity after coming back from my MBA. I actually was able to join somebody that knew the business, and so I learned how to fundraise through him. But I can tell you, I was the one actually doing the fundraising for the first or actually for all the companies we bought, and I was cold calling hundreds of funds at a time. And it's to me, it's really there are some basic industry things you should know. You should know certain terminology. You should know how to put together a financial model, but a lot of it is just persistence. And I think being able to tell a good story, businesses, when you're buying or selling a business, you've got to see the future. And I think then you've got to convey that idea to other investors. And so I think that ability to sell is really important and just being really tenacious about finding investors and people that will back you.
Just like any other business, whether you're in the
It
insurance
is.
business or you're
We're
cold
all similar.
calling, trying to get the customer, having the right sales pitch.
And I think what's interesting too is the events side that I manage is very creative. But I think I heard something sometime back and it said the adage was add emotion to sort of unemotional businesses. So the ability for me to be creative really makes me stand out in private equity, whether it's through branding or how we market or our name, Founders Capital. It's a little bit different from a lot of other things that you hear and who we're targeting. So I think about it from that lens. Like there's a lot of things that I can do that can really help us stand out in that industry. So that's what we're trying to do.
What I'm seeing is the trend for now is really storytelling to be breaking through the noise,
Yep.
is telling the story of the outcome, telling the story of the dream. Hey,
Yep.
there was this client that we worked with, and at four o'clock he called me, and nothing would, and going down the whole, telling that little story, and then they get wrapped in. So I think we're having a transitional period. So we're testing out our business too, doing the storytelling versus just, hey, buy my stuff, or these are the benefits of my stuff, but getting them pulled into that story. And you did that by writing this chapter in this book too, that you're telling your story and your journey. That now, if I got that and I wanted to do business with you, I would already know a lot about you and feel like, oh, this guy's done so many cool things like that. I mean, that's how I felt after I did it. Like, I would want to, even just be friends with him because he seems like he's so smart and intelligent and really has got his act together, and I could learn a lot from him. So I think that was really a smart move. What encouraged you or inspired you to be a part of the book?
To be honest, I've just learned so much over the last 3 decades that I've been doing this, and I feel like I have a lot to share, and I'm not like a lot of other people that have the perfect resume and have not made mistakes. I've made a lot of mistakes because I've only learned by falling down and getting back up, and that to me is the biggest lesson that I wanna pass along is it's possible, you just have to keep trying, and so that for me to be able to share that with other people and give people hope and inspiration is it's great.
So just give us a mistake that you made that you're like, okay, this really was a crash and burn moment, but you recovered with something else.
Probably my biggest professional detour was starting my clothing company. I think there's a big disconnect from what I saw and what I wanted versus who I actually am as a person. When I grew up in Houston and I had big dreams and wanted to go to the big city and I thought I'd be famous and rich and everything else. And what better way than to be a famous fashion designer and start a clothing brand? And so I did all that, but I had very little industry experience. I didn't realize how difficult it is to produce a product season after season, where you could have a hit product one season and next season could be a complete disaster. And then I think the hardest part about clothing businesses are the cash flow issues because you're funding future seasons years in advance. And so this is all stuff that I learned along the way, but besides that, I also the industry was it looked great on the outside, but then you deal with a lot of shallow, catty people, which I didn't like, and I'm not that person. I'm much more genuine, and I'm actually quite private. I think going through that, it really forced me to look inside and figure out what I wanted to do. So that to me was a hard moment for me to have to realize that I'd have to shut down my childhood dream and restart myself, but it was the right decision.
I mean, the business was successful, but it really wasn't personally successful to you. It wasn't fulfilling personally. It sounds
Yeah,
like.
it just yeah, exactly. I shut it down because I just couldn't see myself doing it for the next 20 or 30 years.
Yeah. Well, what advice would you give entrepreneurs today if you could give them a few tidbits of, hey, if you're starting a business or you're in a business right now and struggling,
There's a few easy ones. Number 1 is action trumps ideas. Just take action. You'll learn from that action, even if that action doesn't work out, you would have learned something that didn't work out, so you can cross that off your list. Sometimes process of elimination is better than having the clear answer.
yeah,
I think taking I've heard a quote that you don't when you go out to drive somewhere, you don't wait till all the lights are green before you go out. You just go light by light. And the thing is, if I knew the things that I've had to overcome to be successful in business, I would have never started the business. You just have to get in there. And the main thing that starts to happen is you start to build momentum and strengthen your mind. And so once you get through the first challenge, the next one becomes easier. But you have to be in the game and overcoming these challenges to be able to build on momentum. So I would just say, take things day by day. And again, today's a bad day, then tomorrow's could be a great day. So you just have to take it step by step and go one step at a time to get to where you're going. And then I think the third thing is, we touched upon it earlier, is I think really be careful with your partners, because I think people jump into bed too fast, and having that alignment, which is a marriage, is really key.
Yeah, that is great, great advice. All of those things are great advice. So everybody take that to heart. I hope you took a lot of notes and re-listen to this if you missed anything, because Romain gave tons of tidbits, great, great advice in there. So if you're thinking about writing a book and want to become a best-selling author, reach out to us at eliteonlinepublishing.com. We help you with the publishing and the media and get you on podcast as well and get articles written about you. We'll see you next time. Have a great week, everybody. Bye-bye. Hey, are you looking to increase your revenue, build credibility, and elevate your brand? This podcast is brought to you by Elite Online Publishing, an innovative publishing and full spectrum marketing company. They will publish and market your book to make it a #1 bestseller. Becoming an author is the best way to market your business. So contact them at eliteonlinepublishing.com today. All of their authors become #1 bestsellers.